What happens when Hollywood's most legendary tough guy meets a talk show host who just made the biggest mistake of her career? Well, you're about to witness the moment that ended Joy Behar's reputation forever and revealed a side of Clint Eastwood that nobody saw coming. The man who brought us Dirty Harry and the good, the bad, and the ugly walked onto The View that morning carrying a secret that would change everything. What Joy Behar didn't know was that Clint Eastwood had just received devastating news about his family 30 minutes before going live, and her first question was about to cross a line that should never be crossed. Before we dive into this incredible story that's been buried by the mainstream media, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to see will shock you to your core. The studio was buzzing with its usual morning energy as Clint Eastwood settled into the guest chair, but something was different about the Hollywood legend that day. His publicist, who had worked with him for over 20 years, later revealed that she had never seen him look so haunted. The other hosts noticed it too, whispering among themselves during the commercial break about how unusually quiet and distant he seemed. What they didn't know was that Eastwood had just gotten off the phone with his doctor, receiving news that would shake any man to his foundation. But Joy Behar, in her infinite wisdom, decided that this was the perfect moment to ask the one question that every publicist in Hollywood had warned talk show hosts to never, ever ask Clint Eastwood. The question that had ended interviews before they even started. The question that had made grown men in the industry break out in cold sweats just thinking about it. And when those words left Joy's mouth, something died behind Clint Eastwood's eyes, and what happened next would become the most talked about television moment in daytime history. The morning had started like any other promotional appearance for Clint Eastwood, but there were warning signs that everyone in the studio chose to ignore. His usual team of handlers seemed more nervous than usual, constantly checking their phones and whispering in hushed tones near the craft services table. The show's producers had been briefed about keeping the conversation light and focused on his upcoming film, a heartwarming story about family and redemption that meant everything to the aging director. What they didn't know was that this movie wasn't just another project for Eastwood. It was his love letter to his late wife, and every scene had been crafted with memories that were too precious to be dissected by daytime television vultures. The View staff had done their usual pre-interview research, but they had missed the most important detail of all. 3 weeks earlier, Eastwood had quietly visited a specialist in Los Angeles, and the results of those tests were weighing heavily on his mind as he sat in that familiar guest chair. His hands, which had drawn countless guns in westerns and directed Oscar-winning films, were trembling slightly as he adjusted his jacket. The other hosts sensed something was off, but they chalked it up to the nervousness that sometimes comes with age. Joy Behar, however, had spent the morning reading tabloid rumors and gossip columns, convinced that she had stumbled upon the perfect way to make headlines. She had no idea that her planned ambush was about to collide with a man who was fighting the biggest battle of his life. The cameras rolled, the familiar theme music played, and millions of viewers settled in for what they thought would be a routine celebrity interview. Instead, they were about to witness the moment when Hollywood's toughest icon finally reached his breaking point, and when Joy Behar learned that some lines should never be crossed, no matter how desperate you are for ratings. The first few minutes of the interview followed the standard script that everyone expected. Clint Eastwood spoke quietly about his new film, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone that had made him famous. The other hosts smiled politely and asked softball questions about his directing process and working with young actors. But Joy Behar was growing restless, her eyes darting between her notes and the man sitting across from her. She had come prepared for battle, armed with research that she believed would finally crack the enigma that was Clint Eastwood. What she didn't realize was that she was about to poke a wounded lion. The moment came during what should have been a routine question about his career longevity. Joy leaned forward with that trademark smirk and said the words that would haunt her for the rest of her career. Clint, let's be honest here. You're 94 years old, and some people are saying you're just hanging on for the money at this point. When are you going to finally admit that your best days are behind you and step aside for the younger generation? The studio fell silent instantly. The other hosts' faces went white with shock, and even the camera operators seemed to freeze in place. Eastwood's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady when he responded. Joy, I think you might want to reconsider that question. But Joy, emboldened by what she thought was a moment of weakness, pressed forward like a shark sensing blood in the water. Oh, come on, Clint. We've all seen the shaky hands, the slow movements. Are you really going to pretend that age hasn't caught up with you? What happened next would be replayed on social media for years to come. Clint Eastwood slowly turned his head to look directly at Joy, and for the first time in the interview, his famous squint appeared. It was the same look he had given countless villains in his movies, but this time it was real, and it was focused on the woman who had just made the biggest mistake of her television career. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop by 20 degrees as Clint Eastwood's legendary stare locked onto Joy Behar. What she had mistaken for weakness was actually a man summoning every ounce of self-control he had left. His publicist, standing just off camera, felt her heart sink as she recognized the warning signs. She had seen this look before, years ago, when a paparazzi photographer had gotten too close to Eastwood's family. That photographer had learned to keep his distance, and now Joy was about to learn the same lesson. You want to talk about shaky hands, Joy? Eastwood's voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried more menace than any shout could have managed. Let me tell you about shaky hands. My hands shake because I spent this morning holding my granddaughter while she cried about her grandmother, who we lost 6 months ago. They shake because I've been working 18-hour days trying to finish a film that means everything to my family. And they shake because 30 minutes before I walked onto the stage, I got news that would break most men half my age. The other hosts were frozen in their seats, realizing that they were witnessing something that went far beyond a typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This was personal, and it was about to get much worse. Joy, however, seemed oblivious to the danger she was in. Instead of backing down, she doubled down with the kind of reckless confidence that had made her infamous. Oh, so now we're supposed to feel sorry for you? You think because you've had some personal struggles that gives you a free pass to phone in your performances? I've seen your recent movies, Clint. They're not exactly Oscar material anymore. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and everyone in the studio could feel that a line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. Eastwood's hands, which had been resting calmly on his knees, slowly clenched into fists. His breathing became deeper, more controlled, like a gunfighter preparing for the moment of truth. And then, in a voice that carried the weight of nearly 7 decades in Hollywood, he spoke words that would end Joy Behar's career forever. What came out of Clint Eastwood's mouth next wasn't just a response. It was a masterclass in controlled fury that would be studied for years to come. You want to talk about Oscar material, Joy? His voice had transformed into something that sounded like gravel mixed with steel. Let me tell you about material. You've been sitting in that chair for how many years now, contributing absolutely nothing to society except spreading poison and negativity. I've created films that have touched millions of lives, inspired generations of filmmakers, and won awards that people dream about their entire careers. What have you created, Joy? What's your legacy going to be when you're gone? A collection of cruel soundbites and petty attacks on people who actually accomplished something. The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Eastwood held up one weathered hand, and the gesture carried such authority that she actually stopped talking. I'm not finished, he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. You asked about my recent films not being Oscar material. Well, let me tell you something about the film I'm here to promote. It's about a grandfather trying to reconnect with his family before it's too late. It's about redemption and second chances and the importance of treating people with dignity and respect. Qualities that you apparently know nothing about. Joy's face was turning red now, but whether from anger or embarrassment was impossible to tell. She tried to interrupt, but Eastwood's legendary presence filled the entire studio. You know what the real tragedy is here? You had the chance to have a meaningful conversation with someone who's lived through 70 years of Hollywood history. Someone who's worked with legends and witnessed the golden age of cinema. Instead, you chose to be cruel for the sake of ratings. You chose to attack a man who's dealing with personal struggles that you couldn't even begin to understand. The control room was in complete chaos, with producers frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or let this historic moment play out. Meanwhile, Joy Behar was about to face the most devastating verbal takedown of her career. The silence that followed Eastwood's words was deafening, but he wasn't finished delivering what would become the most quoted comeback in television history. You know what your problem is, Joy? You've confused cynicism with intelligence, cruelty with honesty, and attention with respect. You think because you can hurt people from behind that desk, it makes you important. But all you've done is show everyone exactly who you really are, and trust me, it's not a pretty picture. Joy finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper. You can't talk to me like this. This is my show, and I won't be lectured by some washed-up movie star who can't accept that his time is over. The words were barely out of her mouth when Eastwood slowly stood up, his 6'4" frame towering over the panel. The movement was deliberate, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its quiet intensity. Your show? He said, looking around the studio with obvious disgust. This isn't a show, Joy. This is a public execution disguised as entertainment. And you're right about one thing. My time here is definitely over. He began walking toward the exit, but then stopped and turned back one final time. The camera captured every detail of his face, the years of wisdom, the pain, and the unshakable dignity that no amount of cruelty could diminish. I came here to talk about a film that celebrates the human spirit. Instead, I got a demonstration of everything that's wrong with television today. You want to know when I'll step aside for the younger generation? When they show me the same respect I've always shown them. Something you clearly never learned. Joy was on her feet now, pointing at him as he walked away. Don't you dare walk away from me. We're not finished here. But Eastwood didn't even turn around. Yes, we are, he said quietly. We're more than finished. And with that, the man who had stared down countless villains on the silver screen walked off the View set, leaving behind a stunned studio and a talk show host whose reputation would never recover from the devastation she had just brought upon herself. The cameras kept rolling as Joy Behar stood there, pointing at empty air, her face a mask of rage and humiliation that would be replayed millions of times across social media. The other hosts sat in stunned silence, realizing that they had just witnessed the end of an era. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was the moment when one of Hollywood's most respected legends had finally said what millions of viewers had been thinking for years. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Joy Behar's career. Within hours, the clip had gone viral, with hashtag #RespectClintEastwood trending worldwide and calls for her removal from the show flooding social media. Major Hollywood stars began canceling their appearances on The View, and advertisers started pulling their support. What Joy had thought would be a career-defining moment of tough journalism had instead become her professional suicide note, written in real time on national television. But perhaps the most telling part of the entire incident was what happened next. As Clint Eastwood walked through the studio's backstage area, crew members and staff began applauding. These were people who had worked in television for decades, who had seen countless celebrities come and go, and they were showing their respect for a man who had stood up to the kind of bullying that had become all too common in modern media. The film that Eastwood had come to promote went on to become one of his most successful projects, with audiences flocking to theaters to support the director who had shown such grace under pressure. Meanwhile, Joy Behar's ratings plummeted, and industry insiders began whispering that her days at The View were numbered. What did you think of this incredible confrontation between Clint Eastwood and Joy Behar? Have you ever seen anything like this on daytime television before? This is exactly the kind of unfiltered behind-the-scenes drama that shows you what happens when legends refuse to be disrespected. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible celebrity stories that reveal the truth about what really goes on in Hollywood. The ripple effects of Clint Eastwood's legendary walk-off continued to spread far beyond that studio for weeks to come. What started as a single moment of television drama had transformed into a cultural phenomenon that divided Hollywood into two camps: those who supported Eastwood's stand for dignity and those who remained silent out of fear. The most shocking revelation came 3 days later, when Eastwood's publicist finally revealed the devastating news that had been weighing on the director's mind during the interview. The medical tests he had received that morning weren't about his own health, but about his youngest grandson, who had been diagnosed with a rare condition that would require years of treatment. Eastwood had been carrying this family burden in silence, trying to maintain his professional commitments while his heart was breaking. When this information became public, even Joy Behar's most loyal supporters began to question whether she had gone too far. The contrast couldn't have been starker: a grandfather dealing with unimaginable family pain, trying to promote a film about love and redemption, being attacked by a woman whose biggest concern was generating controversy for ratings. Major celebrities who had previously remained neutral in Hollywood conflicts began speaking out. Morgan Freeman called Eastwood's response a masterclass in dignity under fire. Steven Spielberg released a statement praising his longtime collaborator's grace, and even younger stars like Ryan Reynolds and Chris Pratt publicly supported the legendary director. The View's ratings continued to plummet as advertisers pulled their support, and rumors began circulating that the show's producers were considering major changes to save their sinking ship. But perhaps the most powerful testament to Eastwood's impact came from an unexpected source. A week after the incident, a video surfaced of the director visiting a children's hospital, spending hours with young patients and their families. No cameras, no publicity, just a man using his fame to bring joy to children facing their own battles. This was the real Clint Eastwood that Joy Behar had tried to destroy, and it made her attack look even more heartless and calculated than anyone had imagined. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened behind the scenes after Eastwood's walk-off would expose the true darkness of daytime television that networks desperately tried to hide. As crew members later revealed in anonymous interviews, Joy Behar's behavior that morning had been far worse than what viewers saw on camera. During the commercial breaks leading up to Eastwood's segment, she had been making cruel jokes about his age and appearance to the other hosts, even mocking the way he walked to his chair. The makeup artist who worked on Eastwood that day later came forward with a heartbreaking revelation. She said that while applying his makeup, she noticed his hands were shaking, and when she gently asked if he was okay, he had quietly told her about his grandson's diagnosis. He was trying so hard to hold it together, she said. He kept saying he didn't want to let the fans down by canceling the interview. This revelation made Joy's attack even more unconscionable. She had unknowingly chosen to humiliate a man who was already at his most vulnerable moment, dealing with a family crisis that would have broken lesser people. The show's producers knew something was wrong that morning, but they were so desperate for ratings that they ignored all the warning signs. The most damning evidence came from a leaked audio recording of the production meeting that took place just minutes before the show went live. In it, Joy can be heard saying she was going to take the old man down a peg and show him that his time is over. The recording revealed that her attack wasn't spontaneous or journalistic. It was premeditated cruelty designed to humiliate one of Hollywood's most respected figures for entertainment value. When this audio surfaced, it confirmed what everyone had suspected. Joy Behar had deliberately set out to destroy Clint Eastwood's dignity on national television, and she had chosen the worst possible moment to do it. The backlash was so severe that several major networks began distancing themselves from The View, and industry insiders started calling for a complete overhaul of daytime television's toxic culture of manufactured controversy. The most shocking twist in this entire saga came exactly 1 month after the confrontation, when Clint Eastwood did something that nobody in Hollywood saw coming. In a move that silenced his critics forever, he announced that he was donating his entire salary from his latest film to children's cancer research, specifically to fund treatment for families who couldn't afford care. The amount was staggering: $12 million, given quietly without fanfare or publicity stunts. But the real bombshell came when reporters discovered that this wasn't a recent decision made in response to the controversy. Eastwood had made this commitment 6 months earlier, right after his grandson's diagnosis, proving that while Joy Behar was questioning his motives and attacking his character, he was already planning one of the most generous charitable acts in Hollywood history. The contrast between the two figures couldn't have been more stark. One man using his success to heal the world, and one woman using her platform to tear people down. The final nail in Joy Behar's coffin came when the View's own staff began leaking stories about her behavior behind the scenes. Former employees revealed a pattern of cruelty and bullying that had been going on for years, with Behar regularly humiliating guests, staff members, and even her own co-hosts when the cameras weren't rolling. One former producer described her as a woman who had forgotten that there were real human beings behind the celebrities she attacked. The show's ratings never recovered from the Eastwood incident, and within 6 months, major changes were announced. While Joy Behar managed to keep her job, her influence on the show was dramatically reduced, and she was forced to issue multiple public apologies that fooled no one. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood's reputation reached new heights, with his latest film becoming a massive success and earning him his first Oscar nomination in over a decade. The man who Joy had tried to paint as washed up and irrelevant had proven that true class and dignity never go out of style. In the end, the confrontation that was supposed to end Clint Eastwood's career had instead ended Joy Behar's credibility and showed the world what happens when genuine Hollywood royalty meets a pretender to the throne.